The next question is, and it's going back to a question that we've sort of skirted around, and maybe we need to answer this.
Yeah, maybe we do.
God be personal?
All right. Let me try to summarize briefly 3 arguments why I think that the cause of the universe must be personal. First reason would be causal explanations can be either of 2 types. It can be a scientific explanation in terms of laws and initial conditions, or it can be a personal explanation in terms of an agent and his volitions. So, for example, if I walk into the kitchen and see a kettle boiling, and I say to Jan, "Why is the kettle boiling?" She could say to me, "Because the heat of the flame is being conducted by the copper bottom of the kettle to the water, causing the molecules to vibrate more violently until they're thrown off in the form of steam." Or she could say to me, "I put it on to make a cup of tea. Would you like one?" One is a scientific explanation, the other is a personal explanation. Both of them are equally legitimate forms of causal explanation, and in some contexts, one would be utterly inappropriate when the other would be appropriate. Now, when it comes to a first physical state of the universe, there cannot be a scientific explanation of that in terms of initial conditions and natural laws, because it is the first physical state. There is nothing prior to it from which you could deduce it by natural laws based on prior conditions. So the only kind of causal explanation that's available will be an explanation in terms of an agent and his volitions, and that gives you a personal creator. Second reason, the cause of the universe, as we've seen, must be timeless and spaceless and changeless. Now, there are only, and immaterial, and therefore immaterial. Now, there are only 2 possible candidates that I can think of that could fit that sort of description. Either an abstract object, like a number, a mathematical entity, these are timeless, spaceless, immaterial, or else an unembodied mind or consciousness, a mind without a body. But there's the rub. Abstract objects don't stand in causal relations. That's definitive for what it is to be an abstract object. And therefore, things like the number 7, for example, have no causal effects upon anything, from which it follows, therefore, that the cause of the universe must be an unembodied mind or person. So that would be the second reason. The third reason is that it's the only way in which you can explain how to get an effect with a beginning from an eternal cause. If the cause is sufficient to produce its effect, then if the cause is always there and is permanent, then the effect should be always there as well. For example, if the cause of water's freezing is the temperature being below 0 degrees Celsius, then if the temperature were below 0 degrees from eternity past, it would be impossible for the water just to begin to freeze a finite time ago. Any water that was around would be frozen from eternity. If the cause is there, its effect must be there as well. So how do you get a cause which is permanent and eternal, and an effect like the universe, which only began to exist 14 billion years ago? The only answer to this conundrum, I think, is if the cause is a personal agent endowed with freedom of the will, who can therefore create a new effect spontaneously without any antecedent determining conditions. For example, a man sitting from eternity could freely will to stand up, and thus you would have an effect with the beginning arise from an eternal and permanent cause. So for those 3 reasons, I think we have very powerful grounds for thinking that this is not simply an uncaused first cause, but this is a personal being, a personal agent, which has chosen freely to bring the universe into existence.